Nintendo's amiibo figures look great as they are, but customizing is a way of making them even more special. I'm TJ, and it's my mission to make the map that removes the mystery from amiibo to help you chart the course to conquer your favorite custom challenges and achieve the unique and personalized amiibo you always wanted. Let me make the mistakes so you don't have to.
Somebody call for a hero? Who even watches this show?
That's me, TJ, and Dark TJ. They'll be popping up from time to time to offer some tips, tricks, and helpful hints.
Don't listen to anything this guy has to say. He has no idea what he's doing.
Or not so helpful. It's dangerous to go alone, so come with us and we'll conquer this custom together. Welcome to Custom Conquest. Hey everybody, we're back and I'm glad to see you are too. Sometimes even the greatest of heroes need a little bit of help, and hopefully that's where Custom Conquest comes in. In the game TriForce Heroes, the only way Link can achieve his goal is by teaming up with other versions of, well, himself. Unfortunately, this never got the amiibo treatment, but as soon as I saw the concept art, I knew it was something I wanted to tackle. Now this was a pretty challenging custom endeavor, and it did require a little bit of trial and error.
Nothing Link and his color-coded companions can't handle. Yeah, but no purple Links allowed.
No love for Purple Link. Don't worry, Purple Link, we got you covered in a future episode of the show. Now I didn't get everything right the first time on this one, so I'll let you know ways that you can save some time, skip my mistakes, and streamline the process a bit. But without further ado, let's get started.
Let's see how this Totem Link measures up on our Custom Conquest difficulty scale. I'm gonna rate this totem trio an 8. When I teased that the difficulty level really stacks up, it was more than just a bad pun. To make these links interlink is considerably more involved than just gluing them on top of each other. Let's check out the materials we're going to need to pack for this quest, starting with the components, which will include the figures, pieces, and parts. The foundation of this custom is going to be a Toon Link amiibo. At first I thought I was just going to use them for the base and the NFC chip, but I did wind up utilizing a piece from the figure as well. The main building component is a Jack-specific 2.5-inch Link figure. 3 to be exact! They're ever so slightly smaller in scale than the Toon Link amiibo, and considerably flatter, which is really an asset in the case of this custom. And just like all the other figures to my custom Zelda line, I'm also going to utilize my custom vinyl sticker, which sports the Legend of Zelda amiibo design. Over on the equipment side, let's take a look at our tools and supplies. I spent a lot of time with a hand drill and some paper clips. There's a lot of repositioning of body parts, and paper clips work really well as an armature. Just like past customs you may have seen on the show, anytime I need to access that NFC chip inside the base, I like to use a butter knife because it's flat and durable. You can probably also get away with an X-acto knife, but if you're going to go that route, you might want some eye protection as they are thin and the blades are liable to snap. I definitely needed some sculpting putty and sandpaper. While I didn't have to mold any body parts, there's plenty of gaps that need to be filled in, and for that I used Milliput, and the sandpaper comes in to take out those inevitable rough edges. Break out those paint and brushes, because this time around Link is going to have a little bit of a palette swap. Yeah, but you can hold the purple. Stupid purple Link. And finally, I highly recommend a round nose pliers. It's a really useful tool when you're trying to get a good grip on an amiibo without dealing a whole lot of damage. And see if you can get your hands on a single finishing nail. And how can we not mention the all-powerful Agent of Fusion? He's talking about super glue. I knew I wanted my TriForce Heroes custom to be based on a recognizable piece of art, and I knew I wanted it to involve the game's signature feature, Totem Link. There's a lot of great official art associated with the game, but I settled on this one because it's really dynamic, it conveys a strong sense of urgency and action, but mostly because of the sword! Yeah, as cool as it is to see Link playing with a DS, and as awesome as the fire arrows and the fire gloves look, it always comes down to the sword. Very early in the process of tinkering with these toys, I quickly learned this custom was going to present quite the challenge. The first thing I want to do is to call your attention to the proportions of Toon Link. This cartoony style of Link sports a really big head, a short torso, and some even shorter legs. The entire length of his body is equal to 3 heads. With that in mind, if we take a look at the image that we're going to base the custom on, it might initially appear to conform to those proportions, but the truth is, this drawing is actually a bit of an optical illusion. While it looks amazing as a 2D image, it's actually impossible to perfectly reproduce in the 3 dimension. Artistic liberties have been taken that defy strictly accurate proportions, as well as numerous instances where mass actually occupies the same space. To illustrate what I mean, let's reduce each Link to a single color. For the portions of their body that are obscured by another Link, we can make reasonably accurate assumptions to complete the image based on what we can see. When we separate them and align them on the same horizontal plane, even though all 3 Links are supposed to be the same size, it becomes obvious right away that they're not. While the blue and green Link are in a position to relatively compare their height, red Link is in more of a squatting or sitting position. Now if we just adjust his legs into a straighter position, we can see that he's much more of a height with the green Link than he is with the blue Link. To further illustrate this point, if we align them all on the same vertical plane as well, we can see that the red and the green Link are almost the exact same height, but are both considerably taller than the blue Link. So what's the reason for this height discrepancy? Well, let's take a look at it another way. All things being equal, we have a blue link, a red link, and a green link, and they're all the exact same height. Assuming their proportions are accurate and they're each 3 heads tall, when we realign them vertically and stack them back into the totem, if we honor their genuine proportions, the only part of the red and green link that you would see is their head. So in order to make a portion of the torso visible, it requires us to cheat the red and the green link a little bit higher, and we can get away with it in a 2D image because all the unsubstantiated areas are covered by another link. Since our physical figures are all identical, we can already tell we're going to have to do some compensating. From the head-on view, it appears that each link is located directly above the link beneath him. But when we consider our trio of links from a profile perspective, as we have to do since we're working in 3D space, we can see immediately that it's actually not possible, as it would require the green and red link's lower quarters to be occupying the same mass as the head of the link beneath them. In actuality, it would take on less the appearance of a totem and more the appearance of a staircase. Now that definitely doesn't look representative of the art, and it's not what I want, so I'm going to need to find some workaround. To heighten the challenge, let's take a look at the legs. Blue link's fine down there, but when we extend red and green link's legs over the shoulders, we can see that the legs aren't actually long enough to reach over the shoulders. When we compare it to the art we're basing it on, it's obvious that not only can the legs clear the shoulders, but they're actually able to hook on by completely bending their knee joints. Based on the length of Link's leg, the only way this could possibly be achievable is if the head took up 0 space. It's easy enough to play fast and loose with a drawing, but a physical object doesn't have nearly that degree of flexibility. So one of our potential options is to extend the legs, which seems to be the case with the green link on the top of our concept art there. Another option would be to maintain the length of the leg, elongate the torsos of the red and green link, and to find some way to negotiate the space between the torso and the head in front of it. Even if we can succeed on these fronts, our totem is still tipping backwards. We can try to counter this by inclining it slightly forward, which just might allow us to align our heads one right above the other. So when we consider our practical components, we can see it's going to be a little bit more involved than simply slapping them on top of each other. We know we're going to need to use our Toon Link amiibo's base and NFC chip. When I first thought about it, I didn't imagine I would be using any part of my Toon Link figure, but that wound up not ultimately being the case, so we'll talk about that a little bit more in the next section. The Jack-specific figure affords us some degree of flexibility, but almost every aspect of it is going to require some degree of modification. All 3 of the links have the exact same starting point, but we'll need to accomplish a dynamic and unique pose for all 3 of them by the end of it. The option most appealing to me is to try to make the custom most closely match the concept art when viewed at from the same perspective. In order to achieve this, there are going to need to be some compromises in other areas. Realistically speaking, I'm not going to set out to make this amiibo look 100% perfect from all angles. I'll do what I can to make every aspect of it as aesthetic as possible, but most of my efforts and energy are going to be focused on the front. I know Purple Link didn't get to play in TriForce Heroes, but I kind of feel bad for the guy. Maybe we should put him on there anyway.
Nobody asked you. Hey, Perpy, take your pom-poms and scram.
The first thing on the adventure agenda is to take these figures apart. So I'm going to drop my amiibo Toon Link in some boiling water, as well as all 3 of my Jack-specific figures. This will soften them up, make the plastic more pliable, and make them much easier to pull apart. To pry into Toon Link's base, I'm going to use my butter knife. You can see this NFC chip got a little bit waterlogged. Don't worry if it gets a little wet, I tested this one out and it works just fine. I didn't initially anticipate that I would be using any part of my Toon Link figure, except for maybe the support beam, but I wound up utilizing his legs as well. I think you'll find pulling apart the Jack-specific 2.5-inch Link figure is pretty easy, but as I discovered, the legs are made of a different kind of plastic that's much harder, it's not softened up by the boiling water, and if you leave it in the boiling water too long, the paint may start to bubble. As that was the case with mine and I needed to do a complete repaint anyway, I just sanded down any unsightly areas and I was back to good. I also broke all the legs apart because I needed to reposition them anyway, and then I took off any jagged edges with the sandpaper to make them a little easier to work with. As I was examining the bodies to see how best to align them vertically, it became clear that unless I wanted the heads to be completely disembodied, it wasn't going to be possible to create a perfect totem tower with my trio of links. So my goal was to see if I could find a compromise between the heads of the blue and the red link and the bodies of the red and the green link. Since they were going to have to share essentially the same space, I endeavored to gradually trim away at them, frequently testing it and trying out different positions. This was actually a very time-consuming process. I wanted to remove as much of the head and torsos as I possibly could without compromising the integrity of the final look. The easiest place to buy some space was between the hair and the cap.
It's about time someone gave that Hyrule hipster a haircut.
The hats presented a similar challenge because they really took up a lot of space. Not only did I want to change the angle of the hats to match the art, but I wanted to reduce the amount of space they occupy, since that's the portion that will be pressed up against the torso of the link behind it. The only link on this totem that holds a sword is the green link at the top, so for the other 2 links, I carefully removed the sword with my X-acto Knife, as well as the pommel. Then I set about the very careful business of trying to open up these fingers with my X-acto Knife. For red link's left arm,
Hey, colorblind, it looks pretty green to me.
okay, to keep this from getting too confusing, we know all the links started out as green, so in the interest of clarity, here to after, I'm going to be referring to the red and blue link by their eventual color so we can do our best to try to keep them straight. I noticed that if I twisted red link's arm upside down, it moves the arm into the desired position, but then the hand is upside down. So if I cut the hand off, I can reattach it in the proper orientation. Red link's hand also happens to be the trickiest because not only do I have to remove the sword, but I also have to extend his index finger into a pointing position. The rest of his fingers need to be folded flat against his palm and then hugged by his thumb. This involves some very careful cutting with an X-acto knife. Red link's right arm is bent at the perfect angle to hook onto green link's right leg, but it's clenched into a tight fist. So I used my X-acto knife to separate the fingers from the rest of the palm and removed as much of the extra plastic as I could to accommodate the space of the leg. While you're trying to cut Link's fingers out,
Try not to cut yours up.
if you remove enough of the plastic is soft and flexible enough to expand the opening to meet your needs. I didn't anticipate the legs of the Jax figure to be quite so difficult to work with. Where the arms have a tremendously high degree of flexibility, you're not going to be able to do anything to change the shape of the leg. One of the legs of the Jax specific figure is extended and the other is bent. For our totem, both of Red Link's are bent, and Green Link's right leg is bent. Once the legs are disconnected from the body, there's not really much to distinguish a right from the left in the case of Toon Link. And since we have 3 figures, that means a total of 3 bent legs. We can use 2 of them for our Red Link, and we can use the 1 remaining bent leg for our Green Link on the top. I knew I was going to have to do a lot of tinkering with the angle and the position of the legs, so I decided to connect them together with a paper clip. I drilled a hole in the end of the leg with my hand drill, fed the paper clip into the hole, trimmed it to length, and attached my second leg into the other side. So now what we've got is a flexible hip joint for our Red Link that we can fold right over the shoulders of Blue Link. In the interest of shoring up some space and maximizing tunic exposure for my Red and Green Link, I trimmed off the top wave of Blue and Red Link's hair. I cut off Red and Green Link's belt buckles, since they're covered up by the head in front of them anyway, and then I carved out a little bit of a bowl to create more space for the head that would be in front of it. The caps of all 3 links in the totem are angled at slightly different directions. Blue Link's arcs down, Red Link's arcs up, and Green Link's is on the opposite side of his head. I can probably use blue and green as is, but for Red Link, I'm gonna split the cap in the center, and then just flip it the other way. I'll lock it down with a little bit of glue, and then sand it smooth. By this point, I'd realized I wasn't gonna be able to adjust my Jax-specific figure legs into the required position for my Blue Link, so I went back to my Toon Link amiibo to see if maybe I can modify his legs. While the position is remarkably similar, the legs of the Toon Link amiibo are frozen in the opposite stride that I need for my Blue Link. So I'm gonna split it down the center with my X-acto knife, and then I need a more dramatic bend for Blue Link's right leg. So I'm gonna carve out a triangle-shaped wedge, add some super glue, and fold the leg in on itself to increase the bend of the knee. I'll use my X-acto knife to shave off any extra bits of plastic. I repeatedly needed to go back and forth between the legs and the figure to try to make sure that I had everything in the position that it needed to be, and once I was pretty confident that I eliminated enough unnecessary plastic for it to fit under the tunic, I used my hand drill and a paper clip to create some hips. Now I can tweak the position of the legs as much as I need to until I get the right fit. The skirt of Blue Link's tunic wasn't cooperating, so I needed to encourage it to fold by scoring it right under the belt with my X-acto knife. By folding the skirt in on itself and hitting it with a little bit of glue, it very nicely accommodated the legs from the Toon Link amiibo. Blue Link's left arm is almost completely straight, but I needed to bend at the same angle as his right arm. I could have cut it in the middle, created a flexible elbow joint with a paper clip, and that would have enabled me to bend it to any angle I want.
But instead, we decided to waste time doing it the hard way for no good reason.
I drilled through the length of the arm at the palm, since that part of his hand would be covered up by Red Link's leg anyway, and I fed a paper clip through the hole. I had to really wrestle it in, but once it was in there, I had an adjustable means to fold Blue Link's arms so that it could reach Red Link's legs. This was another area that really required a lot of testing to make sure that all of my various body parts and components were going to align once they were added together. At first, it didn't really matter which figure part went to which link, but as I was completing certain portions of the process, pieces were becoming specifically assigned to a certain color, and it was getting a little hard to identify which piece corresponded to which link, so I sanded off a small portion of my Blue Link's eye to make him a little easier to identify. Since I have to do a complete repaint later, it doesn't really matter. So when working with numerous pieces of the same part, you may find it helpful to find some way to distinguish the parts from each other. With my Toon Link amiibo's legs going to Blue Link, 2 of the bent legs from the Jax figures going to the Red Link, and the final leg from the Jax figure serving as Green Link's right leg, it left me with 1 leg still unaccounted for. I decided to create Green Link's left leg from an old cord that I had laying around. I guess you can call it a link cable? I just cut a small piece to length and attached it to a paper clip. Even though I couldn't make use out of the Jax-specific figure's straight legs, I could trim off one of the boots and utilize it here. I glued it onto the end of my cord, and now I have a pair of legs for my Green Link with flexible hips. While Green Link's sword arm is extended, instead of stretching out to the left, it's actually curved around to the right side of his body. So I thought the easiest way to do this would be to separate Green Link's arm from the peg that connects it to his body, and then reconnect those 2 pieces with a paper clip. Now I have a shoulder joint that I can easily adjust to any angle that I need. While Green Link's head and cap doesn't need to undergo the same severe trimming as the blue and red Link's head, since it's the only one not competing for space with a torso, but I do have to adjust the angle of the cap. I'm just going to trim a little off the rim so I can rotate the cap to face the other direction. I have to trim blue Link's cap down to the bare essentials. It's seriously vying for space with red Link's legs, so less is definitely more in this case. Once I have it trimmed to fit, I'm going to super glue it to blue Link's head, but I'm also going to pinch it as flat as I possibly can. It's the same story for red Link's cap. The flatter the better, so I'm going to trim off every little bit I can get away with. And once I'm satisfied, I hit it with some super glue. At this stage in the process, I had created all the unique components, but it was proving really difficult to determine how well they actually fit together. Since the alignment of so many pieces were completely contingent on the position of another, before I could really move on, I needed to find a way to conclusively determine that all these various pieces were compatible. At every point on this project, I was removing more and more plastic as needed. By the time I was done, red and blue Link's heads were a little more than a face. No matter how much plastic I trimmed away, it never felt like it was enough. Even the neck took up too much space, so I wound up removing most of those for the blue and red Link as well. I was at a bit of a crossroad. I knew if I glued it at this point, it was going to create some really difficult angles to paint later, but I decided it was more essential to know that all these pieces were actually going to fit together properly, and I deal with the consequences later. I started by pinning green Link's right leg to red Link's right hand. Now that I finally established a concrete fixed point, I could adjust green Link's hips with a much higher degree of certainty. I followed that up by gluing red Link's legs to blue Link's hands. I rotated Green Link's cap to the desired angle and then locked it down with some super glue. Green Link's head is looking over his left shoulder, so I turned it to the correct angle and then locked that into position with some glue. For Green Link's right arm, I'm happy with the bend of the elbow, but the Jack-specific figure is folded a little too tightly towards the torso. To get him to spread his wing a little bit, I pinned the peg with the pliers, drilled through it with my hand drill, and threaded the hole with the paper clip. The added support more than sufficiently held the arm in position, and when I popped the peg back into Green Link's torso, I could adjust the shoulder to the desired angle and rotation. Once I finally felt like I sufficiently removed enough plastic, it was time to commit to gluing down red Link's head, followed shortly after by blue Link. Even after that, I found there was still some tinkering I needed to do to make all these pieces connect at the proper points. But thank the three golden goddesses, we finally got it! Now that I've got Link locked, I've got quite a bit of holes I need to patch. For that, I'm going to use the 2-part Apoxie Milliput. I just mix these two pieces together, and once I've got a uniform color, I'm ready to start laying it on. I'll start with Green Link's shoulder joint. I don't really use any special tools for this, I just pat it on with my finger. And once I've got the basic shape, make liberal use of some water, and that'll go a long way to really smoothing it out. And if it's not perfect, that's okay, you can always sand it down later. I'm also going to fill in the gap between Green Link's tunic and the top of red Link's head. Because I had to position blue and red Link's head slightly in front of their body, I've got a little bit of a gap between their chin and their chest. So I'm just going to feed in a small ball of putty. It's too small for me to reach my hands in there, so I'm just going to use a toothpick. The most important thing here is to make sure I have a smooth transition between my plastic and my putty. And we'll repeat the putty patching process here for red Link. We talked at length in the last section about how at some point in this process there was going to need to be a compromise. I never expected I could exactly reproduce the piece of art I'm basing it on, so I conceded that in order to have the front look how I wanted, I would extend the length of Link's skirt in the back to much longer than it should really be.
So what you're saying is you turned his skirt into a dress? I mean, come on, this is a TriForce Heroes custom, right? It's not really that out of character, is it?
When you put it that way, I guess not. Even though Blue Link's body didn't really require an extensive workup, I did want to clean up the area where his legs connected to the bottom of his tunic, so I smoothed some putty into there as well. I let the putty dry and then I sanded it down. Since the base of this model is Blue Link precariously balancing on the tip of one toe, I knew I was going to need some sort of extra support. My original plan was just to reuse the one from my Toon Link amiibo. It already fit into the base and it seemed like it would be easy enough. Just like with my other Legend of Zelda inspired customs, I resurfaced it with one of my custom vinyl stickers. Then I used my X-acto Knife to punch a hole to accommodate the support stand. Since the Toon Link amiibo is a little bit taller than the Blue Link, I need a lower point of contact, so I'm going to trim a piece off the clear plastic stand. My plan is to drill a hole through the center of the support, and to connect this custom to the base with a screw. I also need to drill a hole at the base of the custom.
Oh, right in the Deku nuts.
I don't know exactly what it was, the pieces just weren't quite aligning exactly how I needed them to do. I needed a different solution. Back to the drawing board! My new plan is to drill a hole through the entire length of Blue Link's right leg, and to connect him to the base with a finishing nail. At 6 inches tall, I knew if this was going to be held together from just a single contact point, it was going to need to be pretty strong. But any concerns were laid to rest once I started testing it out. I started over again with my base and added a new hole. With a couple pliers and my bulging biceps, I bent the finishing nail to maybe a 70-degree angle.
Bulging biceps.
I removed any of the platform panels that were in the way and fed the finishing nail up through the bottom of the base. Now for the moment of truth! The finishing nail provided a nice snug fit, and once I bonded it to the base with some Milliput, I could tell it was definitely built to last. With all the construction aspects settled, it was time to move on to some painting. Quick word of advice though.
Then your paints!
I hit Link with a gray spray primer, and I started with a flesh tone to fill in the face and hands. Because it was easiest to hold Link at the base, we decided to paint him up from top to bottom. That means Green Link got to go first, so I filled in his cap and tunic. I used a lighter shade of green for his arms.
And here's where the cuckoos came home to roost.
So, whereby completing construction became exponentially easier by super gluing all these pieces together, it predictably has the opposite effect for painting. Portions of Link that would ordinarily be extremely easy to just dab with some paint becomes exponentially more difficult when you have to navigate your brush around all sorts of various obstacles. It's like the water temple all over again! While there's nothing about the Link totem that's particularly challenging to paint, my choice to glue them did force me to perform some paintbrush gymnastics, but as annoying as it is, I still stand by that decision. It would have been really frustrating to paint it all up only to discover that things don't fit properly. Now it's Red Link's turn! Red is totally my favorite color! I started with his cap, then moved on to his tunic, then followed up with his sleeves and his hair. And finally our blue boy on the bottom, I started by hitting Blue Link's cap, moved on to his tunic, and then used a sky blue for his hair and arms. After that, I filled in their belts and boots with a brown. Next, I traced the rim of all three of their caps with yellow.
Can I just say for the record how much I sheeking hate painting with yellow?
I love the color yellow, but I really do not like painting with it. Blue Link's the only one with a visible buckle, so I gave that guy the gold treatment. When it came time to do their eyes, generally speaking, I like to work from the inside out, but I went the opposite way with these guys. All three Links have completely different expressions and their eyes are looking in different directions, so I wanted to experiment a little bit to see how much play I had, but every part of the eye is clearly identified by deep grooves. Even the eyebrows are outlined, so it really turned into more of a tracing exercise. Eyes are the part of painting a custom figure that people find most intimidating. As far as painting eyes goes, this one's actually pretty easy. Not only is it outlined for you, but the grooves are actually deep enough to serve as a guide for the brush. I can give you one eye painting tip that's always been helpful for me. I find it's a lot easier to paint the eye that's on the same side as my hand. So instead of reaching across the figure's face, try flipping the figure upside down! Since I couldn't do much to move the eyes, I knew a lot of the characterization was going to have to happen with the mouths. Green Link's mouth is pretty similar to what was already there on the figure. Red Link's mouth is open pretty wide. I started by tracing out the general shape with a black marker and then filled it in with some black paint. I put a white stripe on there for his teeth and painted a little pink oval on the bottom for his tongue. Blue Link's teeth are grit tightly closed. In his case, I painted on the white teeth first and then outlined it with some black paint. I painted their pants up with a uniform gray tone, and of course I filled in that unfortunate hole under Blue Link's groinal region. It's no longer needed for the support. I applied a fresh vinyl sticker to my new platform. I wanted to create a little bit more of a distinction between Green Link's blade and the grip of the sword. So I painted the pommel and the guard gold, and I polished the blade with some silver. Once the painting was complete, I brushed on some Mod Podge matte to seal it in. I coated the black portion of the amiibo base with some gold spray paint. To finish it up, I bonded the platform to the base with some super glue, and with that, our TriForce Heroes Totem Link joins the adventure.
Anyone who's ever played TriForce Heroes know that not every adventure runs super smooth, so we did have to make some compensations along the way, but I think that at the end of it we have an amiibo that I'm really happy with. I think it looks great, and it's definitely by far our tallest amiibo to date. Last time I invited you guys to submit your custom amiibo pictures to be featured here on Custom Conquest. Let's take a look. If you want your custom featured here on the show, all you have to do is send me a pic by email, customconquest@gmail.com, or hit me on Twitter @customconquest. Don't forget that hashtag MyCCAmiibo. Next time we're gonna take it down a few levels, but we've still got something pretty exciting and I can't wait to share it for you. It's something you guys have been requesting for a long time, so stay tuned and don't miss the next exciting episode of Custom Conquest.
Thanks for playing.
Dark side out. Great Ganon's Ghost, this was a long episode. If I wasn't here to keep you entertained, you probably would have died of boredom at the midway point. You're welcome.